Thank you. Yep. So I'm not speaking for myself, so to say, but on behalf of the advisory board. And what we have been tasked to do is basically to address an elephant in the room. And that is I mean, all activities that we do in terms of polar science or high altitude science, I mean, they're great. We're going out in really great environments. And by going there, we do exactly that, what we tell others not to do. So emitting. No matter whether you take a helicopter to reach a high altitude, an icebreaker to go to Antarctica, unless you don't do it the way Alice was doing it, so you grow your own sea ice in the lab, you will kind of have an impact. So SPI is very aware of that, and SPI is also committed to try to do something about it. And so there was a little group within the advisory board that put together their heads for possibilities on how to go about this. We then discussed it with the wider board, and the reaction was, well, wait, you framed this far too narrowly. Indeed, what we did is framing it in terms of carbon footprint. But as we have heard today, there is other types of footprint one can have too. Avian influenza was the latest we had, so bringing pathogens through, or things that we don't want in other sites, but also effects on local communities, for example, by going with the Swiss attitude that we have Swiss francs and we can buy everything. So an exaggeration. So we thought, okay, wait, before we start off with setting up something that we don't all believe in it, why not asking what the community thinks first? Because before starting off with an objective, probably want to make sure that everyone, or at least a good majority of us, buys into that objective. And so came about the idea of having a little survey. And instead of me trying to explain you what the survey is about and bore you for another 15 minutes, we thought, well, let's increase the return rate of the survey by giving a time of all attendees to compile the survey straight away. After 12.5 minutes, so we said the survey should take you about 10 to 15 minutes, so 12.5 sounds about right time for you. We will tell you what we intend to do with the survey. I will slowly release you from this exam type of atmosphere. And in technical terms, what I suggest you do is, no matter where you were at the survey, you may have done it all and then maybe not, is that you try to submit what you have got so far. This avoids us losing every type of information you have. What I experienced while submitting is that the date you need to enter at the one question, since when are you taking measures, is a bit of a pain in the sense that that field expects you slashes and not dots and any other type of separations, as long as you declare that you take some measures already. If you could submit whatever you have, that would be great. If you feel that you need more time, or that you think, okay, this was a good start for thinking, but to be honest, those 12 minutes were not enough for me, then don't be afraid of going back to the survey and submitting it a second time. I don't think anyone will have the temptation of submitting it 160 times and then being the one deciding the majority. That would be a bit of a bizarre way of taking this. I promise you to disclose what we will do with that, and that is, so we will circulate also the survey to the members of the community that were not present today. So this will come out with an email sent to the secretariat. And we will leave time until the end of the month for submitting more answers, more thoughts, and whatever you have to say on the matter. What then happens then is that the Scientific and Technology Advisory Board will take on those answers, try to condense them, and try to take measures corresponding to what you reply, and B, also provide feedback on what came out of it. So in the sense that you know what the kind of the results of the survey were. From that, we expect some measures to follow, but I cannot reveal any sort of it since we don't know what the answers are. The final hope is that we will kind of have SPI leading the way in trying to kind of walk the talk that we do. With that, I think we have run over time. Thank you very much for taking the time and for putting the talk in that.
So I slightly changed my title because I have this amazing Maori translation of it. And the title that I chose is How Snow and Sea Ice Controls the Earth's Energy Budget. And the translation of Maori, because I was just in New Zealand about that long ago, is the hanga o te hukarere kei runga I te huka papamoana ki te Maori o Papatūānuku. And the literal translation is more or less, because there's no literal translation in Māori, but it's how the snow on the frozen cap of the sea ice affects the life force of Papatūānuku. And Papatūānuku is the earth goddess. And so I think it would do us all really good if we consider the climate change and our earth as something like the life force of an actual being than the really abstract words that we use, the earth energy balance, because that's not, doesn't really give us any emotions, right? So if you think of it in other ways, you can actually learn a lot from other cultures and other approaches to science. So this is, these are all the collaborators on this project and all the different funding agencies. And so I'm not doing this myself. There's a lot of people. And actually, most of the people on there have done something for these different projects that I'll be talking about. This picture is from a sea ice camp last year in Antarctica after we had a storm and dug out a lot of pennies, which was fun, and it was a really good team building exercise as well. I often get asked, especially in Switzerland, I wasn't used to it from New Zealand because New Zealand is really close to the polar regions. Why do you study polar science in Switzerland? And I stand there, I was like, oh, okay. And so this image is from one of the newest satellites from IMEXAT. And it shows how the climate system is actually really connected throughout the whole planet. And how everything is connected. And the other thing is the ocean currents and how we have this deep water formation that kind of drives the ocean currents around the whole globe and transports heat around the globe that kind of starts in the polar oceans and has something to do with sea ice formation. So I think I didn't have to convince you of that, but I hope that it worked with others. So just to show that anything that happens in the polar regions eventually comes even to us in Switzerland. Closer? Okay, sorry. So I'm going to start with some of the Antarctic and Arctic sea ice anomalies. And I think we all, and also what I'm actually not going to talk about snow that much. I'm going to talk because, not only because snow is really complicated, but because I'm just going to talk about the effects that snow has on the different components of the sea ice system. Because I think that's often, I talk to some people at lunch and often questions are, but what does snow have to do with the whole thing? And so these are Antarctic sea ice anomalies. You can see left is Antarctica, and we've got the season and the anomaly, the season on the x-axis and then anomaly on the y-axis, and you see a lot of really wiggly lines. But I want you to have a look at it in the Arctic. We see that all the lighter, whiter lines show negative anomalies. So the Arctic has been having declining sea ice for a really long time. Whereas in the Antarctic, it wasn't quite clear what's happening until a few years ago. And this year, you probably all realize that Antarctica is hitting all record lows when it comes to sea ice anomalies. And it also started last year. Last year I was in the field, and for a while it was touch and go whether we could actually go on the sea ice and whether there will be any sea ice. These pictures are actually not from the internet, so you can download. This is the same, and there you can just see the from 1979 to 2023. So I think these are all from September. These are from a few days ago. And we can see at the bottom that the Arctic sea ice anomalies, they've been negative for quite a while. But the Antarctic, it wasn't quite clear. It's still not quite clear what's going on in Antarctica. But you can see that until about 2017, you had those wiggly blue lines where it looked like it might be increasing. But now we've been hitting some really record lows even in Antarctica. But Antarctic sea ice is even much more complicated than the Arctic sea ice. So what do we do? So we are trying to, on the left side, you can see micro CT animation of a piece of snow from the Mosaic expedition, actually. And there you see it's in a millimeter scale. And so what we do, we try to do these really high resolution measurements in relevant places. And to incorporate those with numerical models so we can understand the system a little bit better and the uncertainties a little bit better. So there are three different processes that I'm going to talk today about. The first one is the albedo. And for those who might not know what the albedo is, it's the reflectivity of a system. So snow is white. If you ever go on a ski tour or skiing and don't put sunblock on, you're going to really regret it because snow reflects a lot of light and it gives you a sunburn. Again, here, it's showed with a car. If it's a really hot day, if you have a car in Sion in the middle of July, your chocolate is probably going to melt or you're just going to have rough. So why is this important? It's important because of you've probably all heard about the albedo feedback, which is probably one of the more famous feedback loops. And what happens on this slide, you see that if we have snow and sea ice, you have snow reflects about 90% of solar radiation. So 90% of the solar energy that comes down gets reflected back into space and the Earth doesn't have to deal with it. Now, if the temperatures increase, we start getting less and less snow, more and more exposed ocean. It's a little bit like if you have that sunshade in the car and your parrot comes and picks it up from the inside and you have these like holes, and so you absorb a lot more energy. Suddenly you don't reflect that energy anymore, you absorb it into the ocean. And there's a really cool study from 2014 that shows that the decrease in the Arctic albedo, so in the reflectivity between 1979 and 2011, when averaged over the whole globe, corresponds to a forcing that's about a quarter as large as that due to the change in CO2 during the same period. So that's a really big number that we are talking about. So it has a quarter of the effect that the CO2 emissions has. And there you can see that albedo effect. So in the bottom, on the bottom figure, you can see the changes of the sea ice in those between 1979 and 2012, and all the stuff that's in red, that's essentially sea ice that used to be white and reflective, and now it's just the dark ocean that absorbs, sucks up all the light. The next one is the thermal conductivity. So you might know that snow is a really good insulator. So if you want to stay warm, you're probably going to go into a snow cave, and that's because snow, the same as the sleeping bag, is really fluffy. It's got a lot of air, and air is a really bad conductor. The last one is the light transmissivity, and light transmissivity to the sea ice is really important for ecosystem. And in this figure, if a little creature hides behind that bear that's transparent, you're still going to see it, right? So, but if it hides behind that thing on the right that's white, like snow, you're not going to see it. So you can imagine that happens to kind of polar creatures in the Arctic that get exposed to a lot of sunlight. Whether that's good or bad, I can tell you later. But that is not the same in Antarctica, and all these processes are not the same in Antarctica or in the Arctic. On the left, you can see the Arctic sea ice in summer. It's full of melt ponds. On the right, it's the Antarctic sea ice in summer, and there's no melt pond. So the ice actually breaks out before you have any, it still has snow before any melt ponds are building. Slowly, I think some parts in Antarctica are getting melt ponds, but it's not the case yet. And so there are quite large differences that we don't understand. And here are some pictures because, so this is the Arctic in winter. And so I like the top middle picture. The first time I went onto the sea ice, I thought, oh, sea ice, that's just really flat. But it turns out it's not really flat. It's quite complex and interesting. And that's another picture, again, Arctic in summer. And there's really some good team building work. On the top left picture is Hannah, who's in the audience. And her colleague is really trusting her in that. And on the right, you can see some algae also from the Mosaic expedition. This is from the last year's Antarctic expedition, where we were in tents. And you can see on the top left, it's actually a mini drone, but it's quite a large drone where we've measured a few things. And on the right, that little yellow thing that you see, the skidoo that's covered, that's totally covered in snow. Again, that was a really good exercise in team building to dig that out. So that last field season, because sea ice started going out pretty much every week, so there wasn't enough sea ice. And then, so what you see there is Ross Island. On the right-hand side, it's the Ross Ice Shelf, and from the Ross Ice Shelf, you have the sea ice building seasonally. And if you look on the right-hand side, that's a thermal image. So where you see that word camp, it means the sea ice is about 2 meters thick, and it has about 15 centimeters of snow. On the left-hand side, the yellow stuff, that is sea ice without any snow on it. And you can see that it's much warmer, and I'll also show you later how snow makes it warmer. Again, these are those different field sites. So the one on the left is the campsite, which is supposed to be flat ice. The one in the middle, we call it the rubble site. It has some exposed ice and some snow. And the one on the right-hand side only has snow patches. So really sporadic snow patches. And these are the snow height distributions on the x-axis for these three sites not for exactly those three sites. You can see the snow depth on the x-axis and the probability of the occurrence. So what's the snow depth distribution at these three sites? And you see that at the campsite, we have kind of a narrow range, but where we have the ridge site, that rubble site, we have a really wide range of snow distribution. So there are places with just no snow, but then there are places with about 60 centimeters of snow. And then the green line shows the transition between those two sites. So this is the rubble site. And then we come to the albedo and to that feedback loop. So a colleague from FMI has measured the albedo using drones. And so this is a fairly big drone. And the idea was to measure the albedo with altitude, with elevation. So to look at, if we measure the reflectivity of the ice down here, how does it look up there, and how does that compare to satellite remote sensing? Also, as Hannah, who's in the audience, might tell you, this might look like good data, but the data needs a lot of cleaning. But what you can see here, that actually the albedo from one point in the altitude doesn't really change anymore. But there's a big spatial variability. And then coming to the thermal conductivity, this is from a paper from Amy, who did her PhD at the SLF. And she used micro CT data to calculate the thermal conductivity or the insulation of the snow on sea ice. And you see that pink star there, that's what currently climate models use. And you can see that distribution that we measure. And there's just a really big difference of what we assume in models and what we measure. And that's something that we really need to improve. And then I'm going to tell you something about the snow, looking at snow temperatures at these different sites, ice temperatures at these different sites, because some of them have snow, some of them have a little bit of snow, and some of them have no snow. And these are just buoys, so they're kind of chains, temperature chains in the ice, and they just measure temperature as long as you leave them there. And you can see on this figure, so the top one, so that's a temperature plot. And on the x-axis, you've got the date, and on the y-axis, you've got the date. The top is the atmosphere, and then it goes into the snow down to about 2.5 meters of ice. Orange is the ocean. The top one is the one where we have snow, and we said the redder it is, the hotter it is. So these are these ones are about 6 to 7 kilometers apart from each other, so it's not really a different climate. But you can see that if you don't have any snow, like at the bottom one, you already start having, even in late spring, you start having these melt events, which if you have snow, you don't have at all. The top buoy, we actually left a little bit longer, and we can see that if you have snow, you don't get any melting until about late January. So even a little bit of snow makes a really big difference for the evolution of the sea ice. The next I'm going to tell you something about the temperature distribution, because you can go and measure one piece of temperature on the sea ice. But what this shows, this is also drone imagery, and it shows that the different colors. So the yellow is this sediment dirty patch that gets extremely hot, and the darker something is, the colder something it is. So you can see that, for example, in this image, you've seen this image before. So you've got the snow, the ice with a few patches of snow, and on the right, you can kind of see the corresponding RGB image that's not translated yet to the temperatures. And you can see that where you have snow patches, even really locally, the temperature is actually much colder than where you don't have snow patches. And we can see the same in satellite images. You don't need to understand this. So, but all you need to see is that there's a really big distribution. So these are the satellite temperatures retrievals from these different sites. And what you can, on the x-axis is the time, and what you can see is that there's a huge temperature range, just depending whether we have snow or whether we don't have snow. Early in the season, some of it has, of course, to do with the sea ice thickening. And then what does it mean for primary productivity or primary production? So I was showing you that you can see these two little bears. And we were working with biologists while we were in the field, and they were taking samples from all our field sites. And they were expecting to see the most primary productivity where they didn't have any snow at all. However, as you can see there, the RS is the rubble side. So where you have snow, you can see the most primary productivity that was observed is where we had a lot more snow, and especially where we had a lot more snow variability. So the idea is that maybe too much light is too much of a good thing for certain algae. We don't know, but we are still working with the biologists to figure out how snow actually affects the primary productivity, and in the end also skip that one, the bigger trophic levels. This slide I actually got from Petra Heil from the Australian Antarctic Division, which is something that they've been preparing, that should be submitted soon. And you can see here, they were looking at sea ice extreme events. So they're looking, for example, this year, Antarctica has an extreme event with extremely low sea ice. And so you can see that there are different ways how you can change the sea ice. And on the top, you can see the different ecosystem and the different species and how they are affected by these sea ice extremes. All the pink ones means it's worse for those species. The blue ones means less sea ice, it's better for those species. So you can see that for pretty much all of them, and especially for the emperor penguins, having less sea ice is bad. For some of them, like some of the birds, having less sea ice might not be that bad. And I think the study is not yet finished about the whales, but it kind of affects the entire food chain. can snow change the fate of sea ice? So if we have more snow, will we be able to save any of the sea ice? Well, we don't know. But what we have observed is that we have a wide range of snow conditions that influence everything to do with sea ice, and that we need to represent these snow properties as distribution, not just as one number. And distributions are really hard to work with, and distributions are really hard to understand. And so we have observed these different distributions of snow depth, of high local surface temperature differences that's caused by snow thickness variability, by the reflectivity and the thermal conductivity. We've also observed more ice growth in spring with the presence of snow. We don't really know what the effect is, but we have to do some more work on that. And we've also observed more chlorophyll A with more snow. That's kind of unexpected, and we don't really know why that is, but it's really exciting work for us. Especially it's exciting to work with biologists who know something about that. And what we want to do with that is to use detailed snowpack modeling to understand all the processes that are going on, so we can in the end improve remote sensing retrievals, as well as ecosystem processes and Earth system models. And that, because as you've seen, all the Earth system models that we rely nowadays assume snow in an extremely crude way that's just not very representative, I think. Thank you for listening.